Imagine a king not in chains of iron, but bound by a single whispered promise he cannot retract. His armies are vast, his treasury full, yet he is a prisoner to the certainty he gave his rival. Now, imagine the man who holds the key, a man who promised nothing, a man whose silence keeps the king awake at night. This is the difference between a ruler and a god. We are taught, from the moment we can comprehend language, that clarity is a virtue. We are told to be direct, to be honest, to speak our minds, to give a straight answer. This is the lullaby of civilization, the foundational myth of a stable society. It is a grand contract built upon the supposed strength of definitive words and transparent intentions. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. This is the gospel of the common man, the moral code of the well-intentioned idealist. It is the foundational belief that a shared, clear understanding is the path to trust, respect, and honorable dealings. You are taught to close chapters, to resolve conflicts, to provide closure as a sign of emotional maturity. You seek it from others and feel a moral obligation to provide it in return, as if it were an ethical debt to be paid. This desire for resolution is not merely a social construct, it is a profound psychological imperative, a craving wired into the very architecture of the human mind. The brain is an organ that despises uncertainty. It is an engine of prediction, a relentless machine that consumes ambiguity and excretes meaning, however false. It must map the world to survive, for in the known there is the illusion of safety, and in the unknown there is only the primal dread of chaos. Closure, therefore, is not just a comfort. It is a neurological opiate. It is the psychological equivalent of returning to a fortified city before nightfall, barring the gates, and believing yourself safe from the wolves you can no longer see. The idealist lives for this feeling, this false sense of security, never realizing he has locked himself inside with his own vulnerabilities. And it is here, in this most fundamental human need, that the idealist forges his own prison. He believes that by offering the crystalline clarity he himself craves, he is displaying strength and integrity. He lays his cards on the table, proudly declaring his intentions, his limits, his final offer. He sees this act as a demonstration of power, a testament to his own confidence. In reality, it is the most catastrophic of strategic blunders, for the man who is entirely clear becomes entirely predictable. He is a book written in a simple language that any rival can read at their leisure. His actions can be calculated, his reactions baited, his every move anticipated before he has even conceived it. He becomes a simple equation for his enemies to solve, a machine with levers they can pull at will. In politics, he is the statesman who declares his red lines only to watch his enemies dance upon them. In business, he is the executive who reveals his final price on the first day of negotiations. In love, he is the suitor who confesses all his feelings, relinquishing all mystery and thus all power. The predictable man is a fortress whose blueprints have been willingly handed to the besieging army. The walls may be high and the gates strong, but the enemy knows precisely where to place the cannons, where to dig the tunnels, where the foundations are weakest. His transparency does not build respect, it invites exploitation. The world, as a prince must understand it, is not a debating chamber where the most honest argument wins. It is a darkened forest filled with traps and predators. To light a torch and announce your path is not an act of courage. It is an invitation to be ambushed. The idealist is perpetually confused and wounded by this reality. He offers honesty and receives deception. He gives clarity and is met with manipulation. He cannot understand why his virtues lead to his ruin, never realizing that his virtues are the very tools his enemies use against him. He dies cursing the treachery of men, when he should be cursing his own fatal addiction to answers. This is where we must leave the world of what should be and enter the world of what is. This is the world of the prince. To rule, one must first see, and to see, one must cast aside the blinding veils of conventional morality. The first and most crucial lesson for any who wish to acquire and hold power is this: you must learn how not to be good. This is not a call to wanton cruelty or mindless evil, for as Machiavelli knew, such things breed hatred and instability. It is a directive to unshackle yourself from the self-defeating moral codes that render you predictable and powerless. It is the recognition that the virtues praised in a common man, honesty, transparency, predictability, are fatal liabilities in a ruler. A prince must be judged not by his intentions, but by his results, and the primary result is the preservation of the state and of his power. To achieve this, the first chain to be broken is this addiction to clarity. The prince's doctrine is the mastery of its opposite, the deliberate, calculated weaponization of the void. This is the rule of no closure. Understand this crucial distinction. The rule of no closure is not indecision. Indecision is a weakness, a state of paralysis born from fear or ignorance. It is the passive state of a man overwhelmed by circumstance. The rule of no closure is an action. It is an aggressive, sovereign choice to withhold the psychological comfort of certainty from others. It is the art of creating a vacuum in the minds of your allies and your enemies. And as science and human nature both dictate, a vacuum must be filled. When you refuse to give a definitive answer, when you leave your intentions shrouded in mist, when your approval is merely hinted at and your displeasure is only a subtle shift in tone, you force the other person to fill that void themselves. And they will fill it not with logic, but with the raw, potent material of their own psyche, their deepest anxieties, their most desperate hopes, their paranoid fantasies, their unvoiced desires. Their imagination becomes your unwitting agent, your most powerful and tireless instrument. They will construct entire scenarios, debating phantom possibilities, and exhaust their mental and emotional energy attempting to solve the riddle of you. While they are lost in this labyrinth of your creation, a maze whose walls are built from their own assumptions, you remain calm, observant, and in absolute control. This process is not an act of malice, it is an act of supreme realism. The prince feels no guilt in this, for he understands that men are governed by their passions, not by reason. To give them certainty is to give them a weapon to use against you when their passions inevitably shift. To keep them in a state of uncertainty is to keep them perpetually off balance, respectful, and most importantly, manageable. Machiavelli observed that men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. The rule of no closure is the most sophisticated form of this principle, for you compel the target to deceive themselves. Consider a negotiation. An adversary presents you with a proposal. The common man would accept, reject, or make a counteroffer, all acts of closure that define the battlefield and limit his options. The prince, however, does none of these. He listens intently, his gaze unblinking, absorbing not just the words, but the subtle currents of desperation beneath them. He studies the man. He then leans back and says with an unreadable expression, "Your proposal has certain merits. I must consider it in the context of other developing situations." He offers nothing more. No timeline, no commitment, no rejection. The adversary leaves the room in a state of profound uncertainty. The void has been opened. In the carriage ride home, his mind will race. Certain merits. Which ones? What are the flaws he sees? What other developing situations? Am I being played against a hidden rival? Was his pause before the word merits a sign of contempt or contemplation? That night he will not sleep. He will replay the prince's words, dissecting every syllable, every pause. He will invent competitors where there are none. He will imagine pitfalls in his own proposal that the prince never hinted at. His own mind becomes a torture chamber, and he is both the inquisitor and the victim. The prince's silence is the rack upon which his certainty is stretched and broken. The final offer he brings back will not be a product of rational negotiation, but a desperate plea to end the torment of the unknown. A price he will pay, not for the deal, but for the relief of a simple yes or no. The prince, by doing nothing, has seized complete control. He has transformed his opponent's mind into his own battlefield, forcing the man to fight a war against shadows of his own making. By refusing to be the answer, the prince has become the only question that matters. The idealist believes power is in the declaration. The prince knows it is in the withholding. He understands that a statement can be refuted, a promise can be broken, a threat can be called. A clear position invites a clear attack, but an insinuation, a calculated silence, a carefully placed question that opens a dozen new avenues of doubt. These things are ghosts. They cannot be fought, but they will haunt a mind indefinitely, draining will and resolve. They occupy the strategic high ground of the human psyche. This is the art of psychological leverage perfected. It is the science of turning the mental and emotional energy of others into the foundation of your own throne. For the mind that relentlessly seeks an answer has already become a province of the man who refuses to give it. Comment: uncertainty is power to claim this territory and subscribe to master its borders. To merely understand that uncertainty is a weapon is the wisdom of a student. To construct it, to architect it with the precision of a master builder is the work of a prince. This is not a passive state of affairs, it is the deliberate engineering of reality itself. The common man builds his life with the solid bricks of fact and conclusion, creating a structure that is sturdy but utterly predictable, a house that any intruder can map and conquer. The prince, however, builds with smoke and mirrors. He designs a cathedral of doubt in the mind of his adversary, a structure with shifting walls and endless corridors where his opponent becomes the sole tormented inhabitant. This is the architecture of uncertainty, and it is built upon two foundational pillars: the absolute dominance of cunning over force and the masterful economy of psychological currency. The first pillar is the recognition of a timeless truth Machiavelli himself articulated. The prince must be both the lion and the fox. But the naive student of power misunderstands this dynamic. He believes it is a call for balance, a time to be fearsome and a time to be clever. The master knows better. The lion represents closure. The lion's roar is a declaration. Its charge is a final, bloody conclusion. It ends arguments, it does not prolong them. Force, in its rawest form, is the enemy of psychological leverage because it provides a definitive, albeit brutal, answer. It creates martyrs, breeds resentment, and shows your hand in the most garish way possible. The lion is a tool for emergencies, a final resort when the subtle game has failed. But the true foundation of sustained power, the day-to-day work of dominion, belongs exclusively to the fox. The rule of no closure is the fox's native tongue. The fox does not hunt its prey. It manipulates the landscape until the prey traps itself. It thrives in the twilight of ambiguity, in the dense fog of insinuation. The fox's power is not in what it does, but in what it might do. It is the art of dominating through calculated obscurity. While others are busy broadcasting their strength, you must cultivate an aura of profound inscrutability. In any interaction, your primary goal is not to win the argument or achieve an objective, but to learn everything and reveal nothing. You must become a perfect void, a black hole of information. When questioned, your answers should be thoughtful, layered, and ultimately evasive. They should be mirrors that reflect the questioner's own biases and anxieties back at him. Let him leave the conversation convinced of your intelligence, yet utterly unsure of your position. This forces him to project his own narrative onto you. The fearful man will see a threat. The hopeful man will see an ally. The arrogant man will see a subordinate. Let them all see what they wish. Their self-deception is the first layer of the prison you are building for them. This calculated obscurity compels your adversaries to overextend themselves. They will make bold moves to force your hand, revealing their strategy, their resources, and the depths of their desperation. You, in your observant silence, simply gather this intelligence, your own intentions remaining a perfect, powerful mystery. The second pillar is the meticulous management of the economy of promises and threats. The idealist believes words are for expressing truth. The prince knows they are a currency, to be invested, withheld, or devalued at will to achieve the highest possible return on influence. A promise in the hands of a prince is not a binding contract. It is a tool for cultivating hope. Hope is a far more effective leash than gratitude. Gratitude is for a past deed, and its power diminishes with time. Hope is for a future reward, and its power is limitless so long as the reward remains tantalizingly out of reach. Never give a full unconditional promise. Instead, speak of favorable possibilities, of aligning interests, of a future where such loyalty would surely be remembered. These are cost-free investments that tether a person's ambition to your will. They will work tirelessly, defend you fiercely, and remain obedient, not for what you have given them, but for what you have skillfully dangled just beyond their grasp. You chain them with their own aspirations. Threats are handled with even greater subtlety. An explicit threat is a clumsy, brutish affair. It creates a defined enemy. It draws a clear battle line, and it often forces a confrontation you may not want. It is the roar of the lion demanding a response. The fox, however, never threatens. It simply creates an atmosphere of consequence. It withdraws favor without explanation. It speaks of unforgiving political winds and the unfortunate fates of those who sailed against them. It allows rumors of another's downfall to circulate, never confirming its role but never denying it either. The target of this strategy is left in a state of cold dread. His mind will invent punishments far more terrifying than any you could articulate. He will not see you as an enemy who has threatened him, but as a force of nature he has somehow angered. He will not seek to defy you, but to appease you, to divine the unspoken rule he has broken, and to atone for it. By refusing to make a threat, you avoid creating an opponent, and instead cultivate a supplicant, one who polices his own behavior out of fear of your unknowable capacity for retribution. Let us observe this architecture in practice. Consider a prince and his ambitious lieutenant. The lieutenant is brilliant, effective, and popular, making him both a valuable asset and a mortal threat. The idealist, the lion, would see only two options: promote him, creating a powerful new rival, or eliminate him, creating a martyr and seeding dissent among his followers. Both are acts of closure, and both are strategic failures. The prince, employing the rule of no closure, chooses a third path. First, he nurtures the lieutenant's ambition. He gives him important tasks, praises him in public, and hints in private conversations at a glorious future and the need for a worthy successor. The lieutenant, fueled by this hope, becomes a paragon of loyalty, his ambition channeled entirely into serving the prince's state. Then, once the lieutenant's loyalty is absolute and his hope is at its peak, the prince begins to subtly introduce the architecture of uncertainty. A project the lieutenant expected to lead is given to a lesser rival with the quiet explanation that we must test everyone. A new advisor is brought into the prince's inner circle, a person of no obvious talent, whose presence is never explained. The prince's warmth is replaced by a professional coolness. His praise, once specific, becomes general and infrequent. The void has been created. The lieutenant's mind, once a simple vessel of ambition, now becomes a cauldron of anxiety. He has no grounds to complain, for no promise was ever truly made. He cannot resign, for that would mean abandoning the glorious future that might still be his. He is trapped. His energy is no longer focused on his duties, but on deciphering the prince's intentions. He scrutinizes every word, every glance. He grows suspicious of his colleagues. His own ambition, once his greatest strength, has been turned into a weapon against him, an instrument of psychological torment that ensures his perfect, paranoid obedience. The prince has neutralized a threat, maximized an asset, and fortified his own position without a single confrontation, without a single edict. He has won a war that was fought entirely inside another man's skull. This is the essence of power. It is not about making moves. It is about creating a board where your opponent's every move is a mistake. It is not about telling the truth or telling a lie. It is about making the truth utterly irrelevant in the face of overwhelming, engineered uncertainty. The architecture of uncertainty is a magnificent structure, but its foundations are not laid in the minds of others. They are laid in the cold, desolate bedrock of the prince's own soul. The most formidable enemy you will ever face is not the rival king across the border or the treacherous courtier in your shadow. It is the sentimentalist within you. It is the part of your own nature that cries out for harmony, that yearns for the easy comfort of being understood, that flinches from the necessary act. Before you can make the world your stage, you must first conquer the riotous theater of your own heart. This is the ultimate war, the silent internal campaign from which all external victories are born. The first and most arduous discipline is the mastery of your own impatience. The human animal is a creature of impulse, driven by the biological imperative to resolve tension. When we are hungry, we eat. When we are threatened, we fight or flee. When we are faced with a question, we desperately seek the answer. This instinct is the source of all your vulnerabilities. It is this craving for resolution that your enemies will exploit. Therefore, the prince must embark on a kind of spiritual asceticism, a radical detachment from the emotional currents that govern ordinary men. You must learn to find a strange comfort in the dissonance you create. While others scramble in the darkness you have engineered, you must remain perfectly still, your composure an act of supreme aggression. You must feel the rising tide of another man's anxiety, not as a prompt to offer reassurance, but as confirmation that your strategy is unfolding as it should. His agitation becomes your focus. His desperation becomes your source of calm. You must learn to breathe in the chaos and exhale pure, cold calculation. This is a victory won not through emotion, but through its subjugation. It is the iron will to watch a subordinate squirm in the silence you have imposed, to hold the gaze of a rival without betraying a flicker of intent, to hear a plea for clarity and offer only an enigmatic smile. Each time you resist the urge to close a loop, to give a straight answer, to resolve the tension, you are forging your will. You are cauterizing the weakness from your own character. The prince does not feel the void as an emptiness. He feels it as a space of pure potential, a tactical landscape where he is the sole master of the terrain. He is not the man who is comfortable with the unknown. He is the man who has become its architect and sole proprietor. The first conquest of the prince is not a city or an army, but the complete and total overthrow of his own innate humanity. He kills the poet within to give birth to the sovereign. Once this inner citadel is secured, its walls impenetrable to the assaults of sentiment and impatience, you can begin to project this power outward. This is how you cultivate a reputation not of indecisiveness, but of terrifying unpredictability. And it is here that we must revisit Machiavelli's timeless question: is it better to be loved or to be feared? The idealist shouts, "To be loved." The pragmatist whispers, "To be feared." But the master of the rule of no closure understands the true mechanics of this dichotomy. Love is a child of consistency and predictability. It is nurtured by clear gestures, dependable warmth, and reliable affirmations. To be loved, you must be knowable. And to be knowable is to be vulnerable. Love, as Machiavelli noted, is a bond of obligation which men, being wicked, break whenever it serves their purpose. The fear a prince should cultivate, however, is not the bludgeoning terror inspired by a brute. That kind of fear breeds a desperate, hateful courage in the oppressed. It is the lion's roar, which only invites the spears of the hunters. The fear you must inspire is of a higher order. It is the subtle, pervasive dread of the insondable. It is the fear not of a tyrant, but of a god, a being whose motives are beyond your comprehension, whose patterns you cannot discern, and whose judgment could fall at any moment for reasons you will never understand. This is achieved by making your actions seem, to the outside observer, utterly contradictory. You must become a walking paradox, pardon an enemy who expects death. Then, months later, coldly dismiss a loyal servant for an almost imperceptible error. Shower a province with generosity, and then impose a draconian tax on another for no apparent reason. Each of these actions, when viewed in isolation, will generate endless speculation. Your court will become a hive of whispers, your rivals will convene councils of war, all dedicated to a single fruitless task, trying to understand you. While they are consumed with deciphering your past moves, you are free to plan your future ones. Your unpredictability becomes a strategic fog of war that you alone can navigate. You do not rule by edict, but by enigma. The question of what will he do next paralyzes all initiative but your own. This grand strategy is then distilled into the daily performance, into the theater of ambiguity. Every interaction, from a state meeting to a casual stroll through the gardens, is a calculated scene in a play only you have the script for. Your language must become a precision instrument of misdirection. Master the art of the double-edged compliment. Your ambition is a formidable quality. Such a great fire provides much warmth, but must also be contained, lest it consume the very house it is meant to heat. Master the non-committal response that sounds like an agreement. I appreciate the thoroughness of your perspective. Master the question that is not a request for information, but a scalpel designed to implant a seed of doubt. You are certain, then, that your allies in the South will remain loyal if a more profitable arrangement were to present itself. Silence, too, becomes your most eloquent statement. In a heated debate, when all expect you to speak, your continued silence will become heavier, more meaningful than any words. It will make the other speakers doubt their own positions, re-examining their arguments for a flaw you have supposedly detected. Your physical presence must align with this theater. Cultivate a gaze that seems to look through people, as if you are assessing not their words, but the distant consequences of their lineage. Employ a smile that can be interpreted as either approval or condescension. A pause before answering a question can be more devastating than the answer itself. The purpose of this performance is to ensure that no one ever leaves your presence feeling secure. They should depart with more questions than they arrived with. They should replay the conversation in their minds for days, for weeks, searching for the real meaning, a meaning which you never placed there. You have successfully colonized their thoughts. While they are busy attempting to solve the puzzle of your personality, you are busy shaping the world. You are not simply a ruler of a state. You have become the obsessive, unsolvable preoccupation of every mind within it. You have journeyed into the shadows, past the ruins of idealism, to learn the secret geometry of power. You have been shown the blueprints for the architecture of uncertainty, and have stood witness to the silent internal war that must be won before any throne can be claimed. You have learned to sow doubt, to cultivate tension, and to transform the human mind into your own personal battlefield. But this knowledge, formidable as it is, remains a theoretical weapon, an unloaded gun, a sword left in its scabbard. Now, before we reveal how to pull the trigger, how to unsheath the blade and deliver the masterstroke that solidifies a legacy, ensure you are subscribed. For the final wisdom is reserved not for those who merely listen, but for those who are prepared to act. The harvest of uncertainty is at hand, and the moment of decision separates the tactician from the true sovereign. The prolonged application of the rule of no closure is not an end in itself. It is a process of psychological siege, a slow and methodical erosion of your opponent's will. You have held them in a state of suspended animation, their minds exhausted from a war fought against phantoms, their nerves frayed by the constant hum of the unknown. They are now a string pulled taut to the breaking point, a field of dry timber awaiting a single spark. This is the state of perfect preparation. The prince, having mastered his own impatience, is not a passive observer in this. He is a predator in a state of absolute stillness, watching, waiting, his senses attuned to the subtle shifts in the political landscape. He is waiting for Fortuna, the goddess of chance, to present him with a fleeting, unrepeatable opportunity. This could be a rival's careless misstep, a sudden economic crisis, a betrayal within an enemy's camp, or a surge of popular discontent that can be redirected. The common ruler is a victim of fortune, tossed about by its chaotic whims. The prince is its partner in a deadly dance, using his own supreme skill, his virtue, to seize the moment that fortune provides. And when that moment comes, the execution must be the complete antithesis of the long period that preceded it. The years, months, or weeks of ambiguity, of subtle insinuation and calculated inaction must be concluded with an act of shocking, blinding clarity. This is the master stroke. It is not a negotiation. It is not a warning. It is a lightning bolt from a cloudless sky, an earthquake on a calm day. This is the practical application of Machiavelli's brutal calculus, that injuries should be inflicted all at once, so that their taste is less savored and they offend less. The psychological tension you have so carefully cultivated is a form of potential energy. The master stroke is the act of converting all of that stored energy into a single, overwhelming kinetic blow. Whether it is the swift and public removal of the ambitious lieutenant, the seizure of a contested territory, or the sudden imposition of a radical new law, the act must be final, irreversible, and executed with such speed and precision that it leaves no room for debate or resistance. It must be so decisive that it fundamentally restructures the reality of the political landscape. The sheer shock of this action is its most potent quality. Because you have established a reputation for being insondable and deliberate, no one will have predicted it. They were expecting another riddle, another subtle maneuver, another chapter in the endless enigma. Instead, you have given them a brutal, bloody conclusion. The effect is one of awe and terror. They are not merely defeated, they are cognitively overwhelmed. Their entire understanding of you is shattered and then rebuilt in an instant. They finally realize that your ambiguity was not hesitation, but the patient coiling of a serpent before the strike. They understand that your silence was not emptiness, but the deep, ominous pressure before a storm breaks. This single, decisive act of closure, coming after a long season of non-closure, is what permanently cements your reputation and establishes a new and lasting order. This is how consolidation is achieved. The true victory is not the event itself, but the enduring stability it creates in its aftermath. The prince does not rest after his decisive blow. He immediately begins to build the foundations of his new order upon the scorched earth of his rival's certainty. But his most powerful tools are no longer active strategies. They are the passive echoes of what he has done. The memory of your decisive action becomes the new, unspoken constitution of your realm. Your reputation for profound unpredictability, now proven to be a prelude to devastating action, does the work that armies and executioners once did. You no longer need to threaten, for your silence has become more menacing than any declaration of war. You no longer need to make explicit promises, for a mere hint of your potential favor becomes a prize of infinite value. The rule of no closure, having served its purpose as an offensive weapon, now transforms into the ultimate defensive fortification. Your rivals will not conspire against you, for they cannot model your response. To plot against you is to gamble against a force that appears to follow no discernible rules. Your allies will not betray you, for they understand that your favor is a conditional and mysterious thing, and its withdrawal can precede utter ruin without warning. Your subjects will obey not out of love, which is fickle, nor out of mere fear of punishment, which can be calculated, but out of a deeper, more profound sense of awe at your unknowable nature. You have created a system of self-policing, a government that runs on the quiet dread of your potential. You have achieved the political philosopher's dream, a state of absolute control maintained with minimal ongoing effort, because the control is exerted not upon the bodies of men, but upon the very framework of their thoughts. And so we arrive at the final philosophical truth of power. The ultimate dominion is not physical, it is not economic, and it is not military. It is cognitive. The supreme prince is not the one with the largest army or the fullest treasury, but the one who can most effectively occupy and control the mental landscape of his rivals. By perfecting the rule of no closure, you become more than a king or a president. You become a permanent and unsolvable intellectual problem. While other men exhaust their most precious and finite resources, their time, their focus, their emotional energy, their creative intellect, in the futile attempt to decipher you, they have nothing left with which to challenge you. You have forced them to play a game they can never win, a game whose rules you alone have written. They are trapped in the labyrinth of your making, while you are free to shape the world as you see fit. The common king rules a kingdom of land and people. The true prince rules the very landscape of thought itself, for the man who cannot be solved cannot be defeated. His throne is not built of gold or marble, but of the silent, unending speculation of all who surround him. And that is the only throne that is truly eternal.